Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Ancient Mysteries Unearthed. I'm your host, Chris Noble. Today, we have a really interesting guest, Jess Routhenstein. Now, Jess Routhenstein, she's a metaphysical conduit and a multidimensional channel whose work explores the living language of consciousness itself. Now, through her unique system of Claire cartography, which we're going to ask her more about today, of what that is, she maps energetic blueprints and also helps others refine their frequency embodiment, activating higher strands of DNA and restoring the crystalline template of the angelic human. We're going to ask her all about that today. And also, she's very rooted in extensive self study, research, and experience, which then allows her to blend these almost oracle style channeling with divination and also this DNA alchemy, which we're going to ask her about as well today, to really help guide people in recognizing synchronicity as a personal dialogue with the universe, which I really love because I experience a lot of synchronicity, as I'm sure we all do. And it'd be really interesting to learn more about what that actually means. What kind of communication are we really talking about here? So without further ado, let's bring Jess onto the program today. Jess, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. I already got excited just reading your bio again that I put together before the show because there's so many interesting things that you're doing, and I'm sure perspectives on reality that we can talk about today. But before we get into all your amazing talents and the offerings that you have and the wisdom that you carry, I would love to hear what's your journey been like to get to where you are today. It's a very eclectic array of things that you teach, and I know there's a good story behind there, of course, like we all have on this awakening journey. And I would be curious to start, maybe if you have any memories of where this started for you, perhaps. It doesn't have to be a specific moment, but if you have an idea of where did this awakening happen for you, and what was that journey like for you that brought you to today's episode, essentially.
Ooh, well, thank you, and thank you so much for having me on.
My pleasure.
Yeah, it's funny. Whenever I listen to I like to listen to people's stories, and to think about the obviously time becomes so, especially in these spaces of recapping, and as well as thinking about your own experience. My response maybe a year ago would be very different. It's as I remember, things become more spherical and spiral, as opposed to just it happened at this time and this time. But yeah, it's funny because last night, right before I fell asleep, I was kind of being shown all these different energetic seeds of experience, and I felt like I was grabbing different ones that were going to maybe come through today. And I was really taken back to when I was a kid. For as long as I can remember, I was a very, very avid dreamer. So much so that I almost was which is the dream and which is not. It was so visceral. And I would also have very, very intense recurring dreams that I would say maybe around 2017, 2017, I started to go down these deep rabbit holes of, many of us do. Sort of I don't know, I was consciously doing this, but interpreting a lot of my experiences as a child, which started to integrate in that more present time around 2017, 2018, which catapulted more metaphysical experiences, dreams, synchronicity to start showing up more presently. And then from there, I just sort of it was very in the closet. I got my own apartment for the first time, and I just went crazy in terms of establishing practices and doing things that felt really good in that moment. And yeah, it just started to sort of unfold from there.
You mentioned dreaming, right? And how you would feel so disoriented after your dreams. It's very timely, very synchronistic, if you will. Last night I had so many dreams. I dream a lot too. I have, of course, when I was a kid, I'm sure we dream even more because we're so much more, open to these things. We haven't developed all the programs and limiting beliefs yet when we're children, right? So usually we have a much greater sense of dream, and our imaginations are very, very powerful. But I've always wondered, what is dreaming. There's the scientific explanations that say it's a bunch of brain chemistry, which I think we're all starting to realize, even with science, isn't exactly the full picture at all. There's a lot of non-locality, if you will, a lot of I really wonder where my consciousness is going. And
Yeah.
especially the ones that I wake up like this morning, to be honest, I've had a couple of nice Colombian coffees here to wake me up. But I was very tired this morning when I woke up from these intense dreams where I feel like I'm doing work. I feel like there's a whole other reality that I'm living that I'm not fully consciously aware of. What do you think dreams are? Could you give us your, definition of that?
Well, I'm so curious what some of your dreams were last night. I'm sure it's connected to something that's going to come through today. And one of the connections to, and I hope that your coffee, I love coffee too, so I hope you had a good coffee. But it's funny because dreams have been such, like I was saying, a huge part of it. It still is, actually. And there's so much to talk about. I'm just going to regroup for a second and just sort of ask for like a more streamlined. Okay. Yeah. So a few things that you mentioned were so key, like what are dreams? And once we tap into that, you were saying like as children, maybe we are more open, some of us, to receive. And I think when I mentioned my experience around 2017 to start to have, and I know that a lot of these, if you want to call them like ascension waves, where there'll be like a wave of people that get not hit, but, receive a certain remembrance codes, activations. And then it's like kind of like obstacle relays. And then you go through that and then the next wave comes. So around 2017, I know there was like a very intense collective wave for a lot of people. And I was always a dreamer, even in between, being a child in 2017. But around 2017 is when I started to really actively, consciously more participate, whereas before it was just something that I experienced. And what is a dream? Back to the original question, or what are dreams, or how does it? What I've found from my experiences, both as a child and still currently, actually, my dreams are even more layered and intense. I like to call them Inception dreams because I actually fell asleep, ironically, during the movie Inception, but I get the concept and I saw the beginning and the end, but like enough to know that my dreams are literally like Inception, where I just wake up in different layers of reality often. And so what I found is you mentioned like limiting beliefs and programming and the subconscious mind. And I think that plays such a big role in the layers of dreaming. And I remember at one point I got really into, I started having these like quote memories, if you want to call it, of like collective dreaming. And something that came to me, I call the dream temple, where I go into the dream space. I should say it started happening naturally, but then once I felt the urge to research a little bit more, because I love to research whatever comes to me naturally to sort of build on that. And, collective dreaming is such a tribal practice that's been around longer than most of us can even fathom, and how much memory is embedded in that. And when we tap into these sort of experiences and embrace it, I believe dreaming comes in layers according to how our subconscious mind is. A lot of people just say, oh, it's just your subconscious mind replaying dramas or trauma, which, yes, I believe that's true. But as we start to re-encrypt our subconscious and become more conscious, that the world opens up, and then we have astral projection and out-of-body experiences, and even that comes in so many layers. And last night, as I was falling asleep, I was being shown all the different layers of dreaming I've experienced. So I'm not surprised that it's come up today. This is such a nuanced topic, but I'm going to pause now because I could go on for like years about this.
I realized that my mic was muted for a second there. It's something that I've been fascinated in for a long time. And because of course, I've also, like yourself, had really intense dreams my whole life. And I've met a lot of people who have very different experiences with dreams. Some don't remember them at all. Some say they don't dream at all. I have many friends like that. And then I have many friends that are on the opposite side, that they're so active in their dream state that they're trying to like find, tinctures or remedies to help them not dream as much, just to give them. And I've honestly fallen more in that category half the time, where I was like, I need some relief. These dreams are exhausting.
Yeah.
I don't know what's really going on. But you mentioned something that's fascinating to me. Of course, the podcast is Ancient Mysteries Unearthed, and I'm always interested in the historical and more ancient perspectives on these things. And of course, it all weaves together because time isn't really linear anyway. It's why
Right.
I can have all these great guests on and talk about everything that's not necessarily history, but it all connects because you mentioned ancient cultures, right? And the practice of conscious, not just conscious dreaming, but collective consciousness dreaming, where there is a group of people who are maybe experiencing the same thing or all appearing in the same scene, if you will, like a movie. All the same actors are coming in this dream, though. And I've had a couple of close friends of mine who we've traveled together and have been sleeping in the same room, sometimes sharing a bed. I have a very close friend of mine. She's like my soul sister. And when we were in Italy together a couple of years ago, we were sharing a bed at a cheap Airbnb for one night. And we had to stop after that one night because we shared such an insane dreamscape together that we both were dreaming the same dreams, and we went to the next one and the next one and the next one, and we're constantly together in that same dream. So we realized that we were like astral traveling together. A year later, we ended up naming a band that we started together, the Astral Twins.
Really?
Because
Oh my
yeah,
God, I love that.
we had to. It was just too synchronistic,
Yeah.
right? And so, like, two questions I guess I have are through your research, what ancient cultures have you come across that have really um, used dreaming as a big part of their let's say their collective consciousness or their society or their community? And the other question is diving a little deeper into these, like, let's say astral, like, what's the difference between an astral travel and just a dream that's ruminating over your subconscious traumas and programs?
Both great questions. And so before I even answer those, I just wanted to say, when you were speaking about like being so exhausted from dreams, that's a whole topic that actually some clients that I've had, I used to make like I would go to like an herbal tea shop and just be guided to select certain herbs and put together like either to help dream or to help chill in the dreaming, but also just really setting intentions. Like I've learned also, because I've been, yeah, so exhausted. Same thing when I wake up, I would be like, there has to be, like, I love dreaming. I don't want it to go away, but like I need to be able to sometimes be like, hey, we need to sleep. And I know in some cultures, like there's a famous, sometimes when I'm in the flow state, I can't remember specific names, but um, Yogananda, one of the famous autobiography of Yogi, I know that he talks, he talks about like the dream state being, you're dreaming wrong if you dream, which I don't know if I agree with that because I've learned so much in my dreams, but I think depending on where you're coming from, there is a way to tune into just the void, to sleep and rejuvenate, and with intention. And I've had clients come to me and ask these questions, and I will answer other questions, but this felt really important because I feel like there's a lot of people going through this right now, and we also are going through a lot of like purges and activations, and even whenever you're finding this, it's technically timeless. So yeah, it's just setting these intentions and working with the energy, and like sometimes setting that intention, okay, tonight I need to sleep. And more times than not, it usually comes pretty quickly. And there's much more on that, but I just wanted to touch on it a little bit. Now for your other questions. So when it comes to researching, because I do it quite a bit, sometimes, like I said, the exact reference I may not have, but I remember there were certain tribes that when I was researching, like I said, it was a very tribal energy. And I remember the Aboriginal, I got really into like, maybe in like 2018, I was like obsessed very shortly with Aboriginal Australia and the tribal connection through collective dreaming. And I remember listening to someone speak, I honestly don't remember who it was. And there was some tribe, I don't remember what it was, but again, it's a very tribal practice. So the Dogon tribe in West Africa, for some reason, is coming through. I'm not sure if that was the one that I found, but that's an example of how there would be, let's say there was an issue in their tribal community, and if they were in a remote place, from what I remember, it came through as like the certain dreamers of the tribe who had that sort of connection will come together, kind of like you and your friend, when astral twinning together, even though you didn't do it on purpose, there's probably a memory there for you where it's easy for you guys to do that. And they would come together with a collective intention, whether it was like if they needed help on the mainland and they couldn't get there, they would like come together, power in numbers, and call in help. And there's been like reports of this throughout time where that would happen, and people would, just like synchronicity, would feel an urge to come, and then that right person would show up and be like, oh, we happen to have what you need, like things like this. So it was kind of out of survival at points, but then there was also, when I started to tap into this more naturally, I also would stay in, I've been like pretty nomadic the last couple of years, so I would stay with different people, and it started to happen where that's where the dream temple was born, where I would stay with people, and then they would come to me in dream time with like all these kind of like repressed traumas, issues. Sometimes it was fun stuff, sometimes we would fly, whatever. And then I started to get the courage to like ask them about it, and it was stuff that like they hadn't told anyone. So it just started to build on itself. And then there were like these ancient Egyptian, I know Egypt is like really popular in ancient mysteries right now, but there were Egyptian practices like a couple years ago that I looked into that sort of date back. And I also feel very connected to ancient Greece. So I have a feeling that like the Temple of Apollo is coming through. So I feel like there's definitely these different connections through different temples. I feel like I'm forgetting your other question though.
No, it's great because you brought up some things I wanted to touch on as well. Like when I was in Egypt in 2019, and my background here is from that trip, and we'll be going back. We'll do another announcement at the end of the show, but we run sacred site tours here, and we're going to Egypt in September of next year, 2026. Because you're absolutely right, it is super popular, and there's a reason it's popular. It was a mecca, right? It was a absolute. I mean, it's actually the Giza Plateau itself, where the Great Pyramid is located, is at the geocentric center of the planet, which means it's essentially at the center of Earth's landmass, which we only discovered with north-south satellite, measurements. But of course, how did the ancients just so happen to build on this exact spot? It's at the center of the planet, right? Mm-hmm. But anyway, those temples, from what my own personal experiences being inside some of them, I personally believe were designed in a way to enhance our consciousness to do things like astral travel in real time in a very practical, normal way, where you go, it's like you're walking to work, like the rat race that we see in this modern day and age, except you're walking to the temple to go for your daily astral travel, to go connect with the ETs or whoever, your ancestors, whatever it is. Go have your meeting, your Zoom meeting via consciousness, and then come back and live your daily life and do whatever that is. Like, that's how I feel these places, because of the geometry, because of the materials used in these buildings, and of course the location, all of it, the orientation to the cosmos, all of that, in my mind, played a part, in creating a very normal conscious way of dreaming, astral travel, all that kind of stuff. So have you ever experienced anything in your visions or seen anything that, like, when you say you're very connected to ancient Greece, as an example, do you get visions or see any of these ancients, I don't know how else to describe it, but utilizing these structures to astral travel, to maybe transcend time and space altogether? I don't know. What's your take on that one?
It's so funny because so much of what I visions, feel, experience has been it was really hard for me to talk about a lot of the stuff because, as a kid, a lot of us, I'm sure, experienced this. Like, I always wanted to talk about my dreams, and people, around me were like, it's just a dream. But like, they weren't just dreams to me, So to be able to like talk about it, let me just sit with it for a second to make sure. Yes, definitely. There's like a lot of different components and moving parts. So I just want to sort of, sometimes I like streamline the energy to ask to, okay. Yeah. So it's funny because it's almost like a blank, I'm being shown like a blank space right now. And there's like, it's almost like a sketch drawing where if you're watching like a flip sketch where it's like really fast and then the page flips. So it's like I'm seeing all these pages flip, but also like simultaneously this like blank space. And I'm being reminded of, there was a period where star forts, I don't know if you've heard of Probably. You probably know
What's
much about
that?
Star
What's that
Forts.
again?
Star Forts?
Star Forts. No, I actually haven't heard of that one. What is that?
No? Whenever you disappear from the screen, I'm like, whoa, where'd he go?
Yeah, right.
Star Forts. So I started having these, a lot of the way that I receive my own information. It's funny because my throat, I'm very like a body, like my body will respond to the energy. So I could tell that there's a lot of collective, like, what's that game Plinko, where there's like things like all over the place? Like that's what it feels like energetically.
Mm.
Star forts. So I started being shown these star forts when I would go into meditation. Honestly, I don't remember what year because it's been coming in, like I said, like a pretty spherical. So the star forts, when I was shown them, I didn't really know what it was. And like a lot of the way that I receive information, it comes through, and then I'll be given like certain, like visions, names, different pieces, and then the synchronicity just starts to flow. And then all of a sudden something pops up on my feed that the word that came through my channel I didn't even know existed will then bring me to a teacher, and then it just continues to unravel. And the more that I dive into it, the more my own inner visions will get stronger. So, or maybe not stronger, but just continue to like weave together more information. So star forts, it kind of came to me through, well, a vision, a dream, and I started having these out of body experiences. And with the Star Force, honestly, I don't even remember. It just started streaming in, almost like telepathic communication, if you want to call it that, where I'm going to say the Lemurian epoch more so than just Lemuria, because anthroposophy has really helped me to understand like Earth's epochs and evolutions from a perspective more of like not just an ancient civilization and its culture, but like the life and death cycles of like a planet. So from that perspective, the Lemurian epoch came through as like a if you look from an aerial view, like you can just Google star forts, and I believe from like a very like earthly perspective, they were used as like battlegrounds now, to protect like kind of like towers. Like when I went to Sicily, there were these like, I stayed on this like beautiful, beautiful land that had this like very ancient tower from the 1400s. But at one point it was used as like a protection mechanism from, being bombed basically, or like invaded. But when I was tapping into some of the more earth grid templates and really like some of the if you want to get into like inner earth, hollow earth, whatever you want to bring through these other realms that are simultaneously existing, the star forts were sort of like created, like you were saying, the geometry is so important with some. It's funny that this cat Freya just came through for this, because I was about to bring up when you went to Egypt and you were talking about the architecture and the geometry. So it's kind of a similar thing where these star forts were said to basically be on, I don't want to say training grounds because it almost sounds a little bit too dramatic, but the geometry was set up so that you could practice bilocation, trilocation, astral travel. There was something about the energetics of the planet and the geometry, as well as the interdimensional folds, that could sort of align with training the auric field and the human vessel, especially in the more angelic crystalline. You were talking about that in the beginning, like the full awakened DNA codes to start re-encrypting through some of these star fort geometries. Yeah, I'll leave it there.
That was a great guest appearance we just had from Freya, the adorable cat here. And you're right, very timely. For our listening audience, there's a very cute cat happening on the show right now. But it was very, timely. Cats are incredible animals. Of course, you just talked about Egypt, right? They're a very sacred animal for there. I remember you get these amazing, sometimes these downloads from pop culture. I remember watching the movie Constantine with Keanu Reeves, and
Wow.
the
Yeah.
way, though, yeah, we're going back here. I believe the way that he could transcend dimensions was he had to be holding a cat. There was like this, it was very interesting. It was like this, that was part of the technology, was you had to be with a cat to be able to go through dimensions, and cats are fascinating that way. But anyway, we're talking a lot right now in this episode about synchronicity, and it keeps coming up synchronistically. What is synchronicity for our listening and viewing audience here? Like, what's your perspective of synchronicity? I think we can look at it a lot of the time in a more surface level way. that, oh, like maybe something is beyond coincidence, maybe there is some kind of connection out there, but that's about as far as the thought kind of goes, where, it wasn't that nice, this thing happened when I thought about it. That's kind of cool. And now I'm going on with the rest of my day. You know what I mean? What do you think synchronicity is? I really liked when I was on your website reading somewhere that, you believe it's some kind of communication with the universe in a way. What do you think synchronicity is from your perspective, Jess?
It's so funny because I was like, whenever I talk about certain things and I think about the question being asked, like sometimes it feels like a little like, ooh. But by the way, really quickly with the feline energy, I know that there's so, like, speaking of ancient civilization and animals, just wanted to come through really quickly in general. And something that I'm sure will kind of weave itself into synchronicity is there's some sort of like phenomena that I'm sure a lot of us have experienced where if we haven't some sort of like meditation or dream or astral vision or something, an encounter with like bipedal animal beings or like hybrid beings, like there's so much around that coming through. And of course, the reverence of felines throughout Egyptian history and really other places too. And I just really wanted to say, I feel like there's these almost like, here she goes, little remembrances, right? Yeah, of like other realms and possibility, like even, different physics in different realms that help us remember that there's this current reality, we're the bipedal humans walking around, but like there's so many possibilities is what it feels like. Anyway, that just wanted to come through. And with synchronicity, I mean, obviously, like everything, I feel like there's nuance, there's layers to the experience. And actually, when it first started really ramping up for me, the idea of synchronicity, I had realized that there were already so many things like that happening that maybe I just was so in denial of. So I know that also comes through for a lot of people. But just like I was mentioning in dreaming, or the layers of when it turns into just like, not just, but a subconscious like trauma or drama playing out, and then integrating parts of ourselves that then start to like returning fractals and memory and consciousness that starts to almost like open like a flower where there's more of a conscious choice and integration of that. So with synchronicity, it feels like over time, the more that I don't like, maybe not the more, but sure, alignment, the word alignment is coming through, ease. And when we kind of like a flow state, when you click into a flow state, like you get really excited about, a project that you're doing, we're not as like, there's not the trivialness of like, when am I doing this? Why am I doing this? We don't question as much. Not that we shouldn't question. I love questioning, but there's an auric. They're showing me like the beings that I'm connecting into right now. It's like an auric flow. And sometimes I got really into, sorry, Freya, you can come back. Dan Winter's work, if you've heard of him, and he talks a lot about like centripetal implosion in the auric field, and just some of like a little bit of the science understanding. And I often am shown, just like in some traditions, they say like the shaman steers their own tornado. Dan Winter will use that expression a lot. And I used to have so many dreams about tornadoes. It was crazy, like all the time. And once I kind of integrated that concept, I haven't dreamt of a tornado in a very long time. So it's about when we sort of, we meaning individually, and then of course when we tap into the collective, can have a more like sort of like if you think of I'm being shown a lava lamp and also like a wind tunnel that sort of just goes in a very geometric pattern. There's like a connection that happens, and I believe synchronicity sort of comes through in that way when we have that like flow state enacted. Yeah, there's so much to this, but I'll stop there.
All right, I love that. Yeah, it's synchronicity for me specifically is really alignment and ease. Like that's exactly how it feels. It's just when things, we get out of our heads. We love to overthink things, especially in this current modern day and age. We're always in this kind of rat race within our minds. There's so much going on, And I do get distracted by this adorable cat right now
I'm
in
sorry.
a good
I
way.
keep
No,
telling
don't be
you
sorry.
to go.
No. I love it. For our listening audience, we've got this adorable angelic being in the form of Freya the cat with us,
Yeah.
and I'm very honored to have her with us today. So thank you, Freya. But it's great. I think synchronicity is something that we are waking up to a lot more collectively, but we still don't quite give it, I think, the credit it deserves. And also for me, it's like a GPS system of if I'm in the right direction with my soul's, let's say, contract or goal or mission, plural, for this life, then synchronicities will just be going off and off and off and off all the time. When I'm out of alignment, it's kind of the opposite of synchronicity. It's anti-synchronicity, or whatever you want to call that. And whatever the opposite of that.
Yeah.
And it's clunky, and things feel like they're heavy and they're not working very smoothly. So to me, synchronicity is also just an affirmation that you're on the right path, that whatever you're doing out there is the right thing to be doing. So
I love that so much. And that is such a big part. Like I said, there's just so much information. And because like I said, haven't been as active in like back and forth conversations with this, like sometimes I get a little bit like there's just so much information. And it's funny because yesterday the GPS analogy kept coming through. I was recording for YouTube, and I'm pretty sure, or maybe Patreon, one of them. And I was getting that. So I love that you brought that up. But I did want to just say one thing. Just like anything, there's cycles. And I have had some experiences personally, and maybe clients, when you talk about like being in, like, deja vu comes through for me. And I was thinking about that this morning. Because I've been having it since I was a child. Before I knew what it was called, I remember I was like 6 years old, and I would sit on, my mom used to work at night, and I couldn't sleep at night when I was a kid. So I would just like sit with her while she got ready, and I would ask her all these questions, my poor mother. And I was like, I would explain to her what was happening, and I was like, what is this? And she was like, oh, it's called deja vu. And so for me, that's also a very, when I started channeling, I was like, why am I having this so much? And they would say, they, meaning parts of ourselves, however you want to tune into the channel. Just like you said, when this happens, and there's so many other experiences too, like if this is not the only way, of course, but for me, knowing like this is like you're clicked into your highest blueprint, your highest timeline, you're in that sort of flow state, and you're doing like, just keep going, kind of thing. I don't know why all day I've been seeing, I never do this, but like energetically I've been seeing just like 2 thumbs up. So I don't know if someone listening maybe like has that as like a signal from their guides or something, but like I never do that. And like literally since last night, I just keep seeing energetically like this. So I don't know, that might be for someone. But you were speaking on, you're clicked in when that's happening. And there sometimes comes these experiences where the synchronicity, if you will, or at least the way you experience it, may go quiet. And sometimes we can say like, oh no, like I'm doing something wrong. I just want anyone to know out there, maybe who's experiencing this, like that's also a huge part of this as well. Like, it's just like if you want to say like when a child's learning to ride a bike, and they use their training wheels, like sometimes there will be a period of silence, or maybe things seemingly going a little bit awry. And the archetype of Ganesha has been coming through so strongly recently, and the remover of obstacles, but also sometimes putting obstacles in your path to like sharpen your tools. And sometimes that is really necessary. And if you do have that practice of looking a little deeper, there will be synchronicity there, but it may not look like usual. And that just wanted to come through as a piece of like, that doesn't mean necessarily that you're off your track. It may be like a redirection or an opportunity for refinement. And or sometimes life is hard and that just happens, So I just wanted to also add that in.
It also reminds me of the analogy I've used so many times for how I describe reality. And it's one that I've heard echoed from so many other people too. It's this idea that we are literally living in a game. I mean, this is a game. It's a virtual game, if you want to bring it into that sort of holographic reality, metaphor or analogy. Because, even the obstacles, again, aren't necessarily a bad thing.
Right.
Challenge is not, we're here for every game wouldn't be a game without challenge, and I also, I come from a filmmaking background, and, writing scripts and stories, you don't have a story if you don't have conflict. If there's no conflict, there is nothing for your hero to overcome, which we are all in a hero's journey, right, in this life. So of course we need that back and forth, and it can't always be synchronicity, because then we're just living a one-dimensional life at that point. So I think that's a great reminder for people, is that you might not be off track when things are not working well, because what happens when things aren't working well, we make a change. We're forced to make a change. And then that helps us get to another place where we are in alignment. But to get to that alignment, it's got to be a little ugly. It's got to be a little rocky, to force us. We don't change if things are great, right? Like, why would we change? There's no reason to. But when things are a little rocky, a little rough, then that's when we change. And that seems to be how, at least with human nature, that's how we operate, right? I wanted to ask you too, this sense of this term that I read on your website, which is Claire cartography.
Mm-hmm.
What is that? I haven't heard of that one.
Great question. I asked that for a long time. Really quickly, I know I keep doing this, but there's just so much great things to talk about.
Go for it.
Okay, thank you. I'll get into, I'm sure like everything, it weaves itself into the question that you asked, but you were just mentioning, sorry, there's cat hair like all over my screen. You were just mentioning, again, a lot of information, so I'm just going to streamline it. Interesting. The stillness, change. Yeah. So this morning, actually, I've been where I'm currently staying for about a month now. And I'm staying with my sister, and they're pretty routined. And this morning, of course, of all days where I have the schedule, the routine went awry. Like everything was not what it was supposed to be. And Chris was so kind to give me an extra 20 minutes to regroup. Thank you for that. But I knew there was something to it. And as soon as you said what you just said, I could have easily been like, well, got to cancel. I can't do this. But no, I was like, I know there's a reason. Like, I would say 3 to 5 things that have been happening almost every day for a month. Today, just all up in the air. And I know that was part of the message and the energy and the transmission that's coming through today. So exactly, like when we think we're clicked into something, sometimes there's a pivot, and we can look at it like, oh, this is terrible. What are we going to do? I'm freaking out. And we can still have those moments too. Like we'll give ourselves some space to respond accordingly. But generally speaking, I think synchronicity is so powerful, because once we click into that trust, whether or not synchronicity is flowing in the way we think it should, we know that there's a realignment or a redirection or a pivot. And that to me has been like one of the most like rewarding, yet also maybe hardest experiences, because it's not always easy to just lean into that. Like I'm not sitting here saying like, oh yeah, it's fine. No, like it takes a lot of practice and refinement. So I just wanted to address that.
And before you get to the actual question I asked you, now I got to jump in, because you made me think of something too, which is, I think for a lot of people watching and listening to the show too, we all experience this where something happens, right? And it's a overtly negative situation on the outside perspective, right?
Yeah.
Let's say I'll just think of something that came to me recently. A couple of friends of mine just lost their job recently, or again, even the term of lost your job. It's like, well, did you lose the job, or did synchronicity or your higher self or the universe, whatever you want to intervene to get you out of that? Even for myself, I had a great client, just recently say, okay, that's the end of our contract, and I got to move on, do other things. I'm like, okay, great. And also, in that very moment, I'm like, oh, money, finances. Oh, I got to now compensate for that client leaving. And of course, I thought about it actually a little bit deeper for a moment right after that, and was like, oh yeah, of course, this is just obviously something to come in to make space for new opportunities and new things. So I think it's also really important to make sure that our perspectives, it's a fine line, because you don't want to just, I've also seen on the opposite side where everyone's like, oh, it's all synchronicity, and I guess if that happened, then it was meant to be. And I'm like,
right.
Well, you still have discernment as a human being. You can still intervene in this reality of yours in a way and go, no, I want this. Right. So I'm gonna really stick to this thing, even if there's some clunkiness and whatnot. And I think that's sometimes maybe a test even that's being put in front of us to be like, well, how badly do you want it? Are you gonna go through these obstacles to get there? Which of course our ancients were always doing this in their initiations, right? So I think that's also, I think this is, I guess we've kind of hammered home this point, but I think it's just important for people to to give themselves some slack, and I guess to always use your discernment, whether when you're tapping into the synchronicity, and what is the true meaning of it, what is it there for, and for you. And I think that just comes down to discernment, because like you said, it's very nuanced, and I think it's a pretty complex situation we're in here. But ultimately, I guess if you're just following your intuition, that's the best thing you can probably do.
Yeah, no, and obviously, like the grace that you have, like when you experience what you just talked about, like a contract ending and people that and well, not to be so annoying, but synchronistically this morning, that was part of the my brother-in-law has had his job for a long time, and today he got an announcement they were doing layoffs in his
Wow.
company. So he was literally, and I was like, this reminds me of like, back in the olden days when they talked about like stoning people in public. Like they were just like, the whole company was just sitting around waiting to see if they were going to have a job this morning. Like it was
Oh
crazy.
man.
So you bring that up, and it was that's so connected, because I was sitting there with him like, oh my God, are you okay? What can I do? Like, do you need some water? Like what's going on? Anyway, so I'm sure that wasn't an accident, of course. So there's that type of synchronicity. And like you said, there's also, and I know I have fallen into this, I guess you can say, synchronicity trap of where I've been in situations that maybe weren't that great. But I felt like I needed to be there to be able to have, like you were saying, that human discernment, to be like, even though there was synchronicity and it was flowing, I had to stop and be like, this is not good. I don't want to be here. I need to get out of here. I may not have the money to do it, but I'm going to, like, I remember I can't believe I'm going to tell this story. This is crazy, but I was at this place in Mexico. I was literally like basically on a deserted beach. It's a very long story. And like, it should have been great and like everything I wanted. And it just wasn't, even though there was synchronicity. And I remember I didn't have enough money to leave where I was. That's a whole other story. But I was there, and I went by myself, and I basically like screamed in this like little cave that I found right next to the beach. And I was like, I need to get out of here. I don't know how, but I need to go now. The next day, somehow everything came together and I was gone. So like human discernment is so important. And I think that is such a good point. And I just wanted to, like, without giving too much right now, we don't have time to go into the whole story, but yeah.
It is so important. It is so important. We talk about it a lot on this podcast. Human discernment. It's still our reality. Everyone watching and listening to this show, it's your reality.
Mm-hmm.
We're just reflections, of your own consciousness here, and it's still up to you. There is power in the user experience that is this reality, right? Like we're the ones on a quantum level, literally creating everything in front of us that we're feeling and sensing and experiencing. So yeah, we absolutely have discernment. I find sometimes in the spiritual awakening journey, we can actually lose a bit of that self-empowerment, because we think everything's outside of ourselves.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you, universe, for that. Well, you are the universe, really. If
Right.
you want
Exactly.
to get down to the fractal nature of it all,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So it's just so interesting. But look, I'm dying of curiosity here. What is a Claire cartography? I'm assuming it's got something to do with your clairsenses, and that's as far as I can, and some form of cartography, I guess.
Yeah. So that was a phrase that started coming through when I honestly don't remember when it started coming in, but when I would click in, especially when I started YouTube, I kept hearing the phrase over and over again, like clear cartography, clear cartography. And I remember sitting there, and it's like I knew it in my body, like my body would respond, but I wasn't, and I knew, like, I'm really into etymology, so I look up words all the time. So I knew it meant like clear mapping in terms of like English translation. But it's sort of been like a process of unfolding, and what it sort of birthed into now. Right, clair, and in French means clear. So any of the clairs, and another phrase that comes through sort of with clear cartography is integrated divination. That's been coming through pretty recently. And when I started doing one-on-one sessions, I would get these experiences where it was just sort of like patterns and themes would sort of cycle through when I could tap into someone's energy field. And that was like sort of the beginning of that. But then it started to go a bit more. It wasn't that linear. Both were kind of happening at the same time, where when like we were talking about, let's say, collective dreaming. So I would look into collective dreaming, and then I would start to see these like patterns, like this mapping coming through of how throughout time it would like cycle into the present moment, and different manifestations of it. So clair cartography is really just like a pattern, kind of like synchronicity, like a pattern recognition with an integrated divination and study that sort of like brings through these energetic mapping points in a very non-linear fashion. Sometimes it can birth through as a linear story, but oftentimes it's like very cyclical.
So maybe walk me through, like, for instance, with one of your clients, like what does that look like when you're mapping out this Claire cartography for them? Like, what? Give me like an example, maybe of what that looks like.
Yeah. Okay. Can I use you for an example?
Go for it.
So you were speaking about like your friend when you have these experiences with going to Italy, which, by the way, part of like geography, right? Like in astrocartography, the mapping, like when you go to these different places, we can have these activations within us, memories that get, because I'm being shown like the molecular structure and like the water within our body. We're mostly made up of water, and when we put water into our body or go to different bodies of water, there can be this like alignment of memory that hatches, if you will. Sometimes like when I got into chelantic science, I'm being shown like the chelons, and I call it like hatching chelon codes. So essentially, like your friend, you guys were friends. You said you called her like a soul sister, I think, and then you slept in bed together and had this astral experience. And then, you went into this very non-linear space, and a memory came forth. And then later, your band was born. So it's like this mapping of, when we get into this nonlinear space, what can come from these energetic points that then birth these other creations, essentially. And I'm sure with you and your friend, there are, if you tap in deeper from yourselves, I'm seeing like when you guys were kids, like I'm sure you had some maybe mirroring experiences that would then continue to come together and birth these other creations through these like energetic mapping points, basically, is what I'm being shown.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, thank you for that. Yeah, and I think with certain people, it's stronger than, of course, with others. And
Yeah.
my friend who we're referring to, her name's Alessandra, and we've had many. I already know just intuitively, we've had so many lifetimes together. She's definitely a very deep soul friend connection, soul family, if you will. And it's interesting you mentioned astrocartography. For those of our listeners, our audience who are watching and listening, if you don't know what that is, it's essentially it's been really helpful for me, to be honest. The last couple of years with all my travel, much like yourself, Jess, I've been pretty nomadic and been all around the world doing wonderful things, but also going through the human experience, which requires some shadow work and some other places or other things. And I find certain places will bring that up or be very gentle in that energy, and so basically, to give our audience a quick definition on astrocartography, it's essentially astrology and cartography mixed together. What you basically do is you put in your birth chart information, and then it will show you all the places on the world that are related to different aspects of your astrology, essentially. So that could be certain places have a higher, let's say, likelihood for romance, or higher likelihood for creative expression, or just places where or some, on the opposite side, some places are just going to bring up a lot of your traumas and shadow. But as we talked about
Saturn.
yeah, your Saturn line, exactly. And as we said, though, that's not a bad thing. And
Right.
that needs to come up for a reason. And so if you're somewhere and you're like, wow, this place sucks, I'm just feeling awful and all these things, you're like, well, yeah, you don't have to come back if you don't want to, but there's a reason you're here. And maybe there's something to do with the land, and the area and the energy of where you are that specifically is doing something to you as an individual soul, right? And that's where I think astrocartography is really helpful. I've done a lot of I get my astrocartography and then I plug it into ChatGPT, and I send my whole itinerary, and then I ask Chat to break it down. And of course, the way I like to use AI is I'll plug in my human design, my gene keys, and everything else, right? And just give it the most detailed, bit of info to then distill
Map,
in it.
right? Sorry to interrupt, but that's like
No,
the mapping aspect of, yeah.
100%,
Yeah.
right? That's why I love it. And my brain really enjoys seeing it all mapped out. And, oh, this is what your astrocartography was saying about Italy, Chris, or about where I live in Canada and West Coast Canada and Vancouver or something, or whatever it is, right? Or where I am currently in Colombia. It's
Oh,
fascinating. I think it's so fascinating because usually when I do it after the fact. I don't really want to mess with my preconceived ideas of where I'm going to be going and what that's going to be. I do a little bit, but it's more after the fact of when I get the reading on it, and I'm floored at the accuracy every time. You know, it's pretty. I don't know if you've experienced that in certain places that have just a very specific energy for you.
Oh yeah, it's so funny when you were speaking. I was listening so intently, but like I was seeing so many different pieces coming together, and I got a notification from an airline while you were speaking about a plane ticket.
Wow.
So it was just really funny.
Wow.
That's why I was like looking over, and I was like, of course that comes in right now. And I was looking at your title, you know, Ancient Mysteries Unearthed. Quite literally, when you go into whether physically into the earth or in our own akash that's coming through, or the CDT plates, or whatever energetic aspect and or physical, you're unearthing something that, or you're giving birth, you know, to a baby, whatever it is. Like there's the natural order of chaos and order comes in, and like part of what you were describing, all of that is connected. And it's so funny because when I was, as you were talking, I was being reminded so much of each experience that I don't remember what year. I think it was 2022 to 2023. It was when I was a little bit more. I've still been traveling, like you were saying, and I would love to talk to you one day about Colombia because I was there a couple years back. Actually, I think 2017. That year keeps coming up. Anyway, but when I was, you know, going a new place, let's say every month, I started to be able to tap into the plane ride energy. So when I was like on a plane, even whether it was a 6-hour plane ride, a 3-hour, or a 12-hour, I would get these like downloads of information. I don't know if download is the right word, but I was kind of like aromancy, you know, when you're reading the like electrical currents or the energy of the sky or the atmospheric pressure. It's like I was getting divination through my plane rides, and it would give me these like glimpses into what the destination was going to kind of be like. And I thought I was going a little like, you know, like really, did I just have too much time on my hands on these planes? But like, because I have nothing downloaded. I just sort of meditate on planes or just like sit with the energy. I don't really like use my phone at all. But it started to really like that pattern again, like clair cartography. It's like this idea of pattern recognition and integrated of all the other clairs and utilizing that. So when you were talking about each place, when I would get there, I would also have these, like you were saying, if you look at your astrocartography lines and the gene keys and, you know, just basically all these different tools we can use to give us a map of something, that's sort of what clair cartography is born to be. Like I've studied so many different metaphysical concepts and divination practices that like the clear mapping of whatever me and anyone else who partakes downloads into their own uploads, downloads, whatever, into their own being. It sort of like presents this map. And each of us have a unique connection because you may be into astrocartography, astrology, and let's say human design, and someone else may have tarot and, you know, studying the Indinka codes. There's like these little tribal like codes with meanings, you know, and so each one of us that bursts through our own study has like a clear mapping of our unique blend. You know, it's like they're showing me like different strands of an herb where you can like blend things together, and it may have like similar roots and bases, but the after effect is a little bit different, you know, the combination. Anyway, so I like Sicily keeps coming up for some reason. You were talking about Italy, and I remember like, you know, I'll see like a lot of us colors, I call it the cosmic color code, where light codes, different like auras, energetic imprints will come through, and I can see them, you know, just wherever. And each place that I've gone will have like a new color code. Sometimes belongs to Earth, sometimes may not be so earthly, come through that like place that I'm activated through, and or it's more like they're showing me like a figure 8. It's like a reciprocal, like you activate and it activates you kind of thing.
Right. Or flip it and it's in the infinity sign, right? And it's just like that infinite,
right, like continuous, yeah,
infinite loop of energy. You know, it's really interesting you say Sicily because I was just there in March. So
oh yeah,
yeah, and then that time, so you know that part of Italy or that time I was in Italy was actually it was just this last March, and it was a really beautiful experience and also very challenging because I was going through some massive shadow work, you know, and just constant new unearthings and layers of the traumas in the programs, right, and the limiting beliefs. And I was doing some deep work on that while I was there in Sicily. And you know, I wasn't sure. There's times where I'm like, is it the energy of Sicily making me lose my mind right now, and I'm having all these hilarious existential crises. And
Yeah.
half the time when you're feeling on those days where you're feeling extra like your inner teenagers, maybe you're having a good pout or something. I was kind of blaming the land a bit on that, and then moved through it, ate some good Italian food, and was like, no, Italy's great. I
Yeah.
still I still love Sicily. I'm so very much. I've gotten zero Italian heritage, but my soul is very, very aligned to the Mediterranean and Italy specifically. And I know it's
Very
not the
same.
land there, but yeah, I think you
Yeah.
said Greece, right, for you?
Well, actually, Italy. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Sicily. So I feel that way with Sicily, even though I know I have zero Italian heritage. But the way Sicily was for you was I did go to Greece physically, and it was like one of the most challenging places. I was there solo, and it was like I almost drowned, like legit. I lost my phone in the ocean,
Oh
and
wow.
it was just like one thing after another. There was like so many different things when I was there. I was just like, this was in 2019 actually. I was in Crete, and I kept having, there's so much to it. I won't go into it all, but basically it was a very similar experience. Like it was so beautiful, but it was like just constant chaos. Like crazy things were happening. Like, yeah. So I
Yeah,
understand that.
it's just this navigating this reality. That leads me, as we kind of get closer to the end of the episode here, that leads me to a question that I'll throw at you, really, for our viewers and our audience here, because I know a lot of you watching and listening are on the awakening journey, or if you want to use other terms, like your awareness is expanding of what reality is, right? And just to bring it into more grounded human terms, you're just realizing and asking the questions of like, what does this all mean? Who am I? What is this? Why am I even here? These
Yeah.
classic ageless questions, but they're coming up for a lot of people because I think, especially since 2020, we were all globally forced to take a pause. And
Yeah.
when we took that pause, I think a lot of people started to actually ask those questions. Because here's the thing, like, if you want to keep a population unenlightened, keep them busy, keep them in scarcity, and keep them in fight or flight, and which, even in the quote unquote Western, modern developed world, I mean, we're still in fight or flight. We're still in the the jungle, or the we're in the animal kingdom still. We haven't really quite left. We're still, a lot of us, in fight or flight. So we don't ask those questions. We don't, because we're not, once we're in that reptilian brain still, we don't have the
Yeah.
capacity to move beyond that, right? To higher states of consciousness, to higher states of awareness. But it seems very clearly now that globally that has shifted and is continuing to shift a lot, but it's very dysregulating for a lot of people. And as you know, and as I know, our lives have been quite colorful on a spiritual level. So we've had a lot of these experiences, we've had time, and we have now tools to navigate these situations. For those that are new to this, for those that are new to the journey, what kind of general advice would you give them? And maybe if you could throw us like a couple of your tools that you like to use to just be a multidimensional human in this reality.
Yeah. Great question. So something that stood out to me when you were speaking, you said now that we have time to not just be like reactive and a product of our, what we were thrown or the hand we were dealt. And I think that's also goes back to what we were speaking on earlier about like, yes, following the flow of synchronicity, but also having that discernment. Like I have time now because I chose that. And it was not easy at all. Like I left a 10+ year career where like most people in my life thought I was like insane. And honestly, financially, I still have not recovered. I'm still going through it. It's been 3 years. And like you were saying earlier, sometimes we go through those challenges that even though there's been infinite amount of synchronicity, I'm still not financially at all where I was before, not even close. But with that being said, and I'm not just telling everyone to go quit their jobs and be financially unstable, not at all. What I'm saying is there's choices that you mentioned the word awareness, which I love. It's so simple, but like once we continue to add awareness, there's a choice that we get to incorporate, and we can. By the way, there's also I think a lot of people who feel whether not like necessarily consciously, but like choose to play some sort of role where maybe they are not choosing awareness, and like especially when we first start to have that remembrance of awareness and that choice, we can like want to like wake everyone else up. But like I really learned that I believe in like Taoism or Taoism, if I'm saying that correctly. Sometimes when I'm in the zone, I can't remember certain words. Like I said before, uh, there's like this, I guess, like wise proverb or whatever that says like, you know, sometimes the most quiet one who just like observes allows everyone to kind of come in their own timing. And I think that's a big part of it. Like when we go internally, it's just because you are having these awarenesses doesn't mean your entire family needs to do it too. You know, like I'm staying with my sister right now, and like we are so different in this way. She's not really into a lot of stuff, but we've come to a place where like I respect who she is, and she's such a good mom, and her morals are so like strong. Even though we don't have the same maybe outlook on life or view on reality, but there's something about like being able to honor your own. It's kind of fun sometimes to be so multidimensional and just walking amongst the world where maybe not everyone's there yet, and that's okay. Like there's a duality to it, but there's also a polarity integration and different phases of that. And sometimes you'll see people around you start to have these quantum leaps, even if it's not as conscious, because it's like all connected through a ripple effect, you know? So that's kind of coming through as just like take a breath, take your time, there's no rush, and like just really some tools I feel like that have assisted me personally and that clients I've found is really like learning and practicing that self-trust of like what feels good for you. Because sometimes when we're going through, like you mentioned, the reptilian brain, when we're unraveling or re-encrypting different parts of ourselves, it's messy. You know, sometimes you like there's been phases where I was so exhausted, I literally just ordered takeout for like a month because I had money then. And I was like, someone can judge me, but like I was so burnt out. That's what I needed in that month. And would I do that now? Probably not. But like that's what I needed then. And I used to feel a lot of shame around that. And I don't anymore because it gave me the space to just what I did, like what I was missing in that time. That's what I needed. Where someone else may be going through, you know, their first choice to give themselves what they need in that moment. It may not look like what someone else needs. So it's really about like trusting yourself, and that takes practice as well. There's so much, but one tool I think that's coming through the strongest that I can also add in is it's a very simple phrase to know thyself. And some people, you know, we talk about meditation all the time. Maybe meditation for you may look very different for someone else. So again, the repeating theme is really just like we can listen to Instagram or YouTube or these podcasts all day, which have helped me like so much to really just come back to knowing that I already knew what I needed and just to trust that. So yeah, that's coming through.
I love that, Jess. Absolutely. You know, it reminds me of a story I heard of this woman who had an awakening, but it was like a slow unraveling. And so she had her normal life, family, job, all the normal things. But she got this download or this strong feeling of I need to start ice skating again. And she hadn't ice skated since she was a kid. Random, weird, not spiritual sounding at all, and certainly not esoteric. It's very like just ice skating.
Right.
So she does. So she follows the urge, though, right? And she starts going almost every morning, you know, before work, and she just does like half hour of ice skating or whatever. The joy that her inner child, you know, got to experience when she reconnected with this old activity that she loved as a kid, it opened up an entirely new reality for her in which she shifted everything, her job, her life, blah, blah, like the classic story of everything changed after that moment. Ice skating. Like, this is why, to your point, it's going to look different for everybody, you know? And I just got the urge, you know, this year from traveling a lot that I'm so excited for this winter coming up. We're recording this in the fall of 2025. You know, I'm so excited for the winter coming up to go back to, you know, cold Canada and start playing hockey again, going skiing and doing all these sports I loved as a kid. I'm just following a feeling, but I know that there's probably some deeper reasons to that as well. And it's just going to look like you got to just tune into what's right for you. You know, like it's that self, well, I was going to say self-knowing, like you said, know thyself, right? It's just understanding more of who you are on a deeper level. And it just doesn't have to look super complicated sometimes, right? It can just look playful. It can look silly. It can look like I need to start playing Scrabble again. I need to start.
I just played Scrabble the other day for the first time in like years. It's so funny. Yeah.
This is a very interesting episode because there's some telepathy. Because I never think of Scrabble. I don't even play Scrabble.
I
Where did
didn't
that come
either.
from? Isn't that interesting? I
And
love
I was in
this.
Lake Tahoe where I could see like snow on the mountain. So you're talking about like snowing and cold. And yeah, I've been going to all warm places mostly. So yeah, definitely something there.
There you go. Right. So,
Mhm.
so for our audience, it's not going to look the same. So when you see people like us talking about this stuff, just take what resonates, leave the rest,
Yeah.
because it's going to look super, super specific to who you are. Right. And so, just with that in mind, I think I would love if before we can kind of conclude the episode here, what do you think our audience needs to hear right now? What do you think the collective needs to hear? Like I said, we're recording in the fall of 2025. What is a message you'd like to leave with our audience about anything that we've talked about today or nothing? Like, what do we need to hear right now? Because I know just to give some context to our listeners and viewers here, it's a crazy time on planet Earth, and maybe some extraterrestrials tuning into this episode. I don't know, but you guys all know this is the nuts time here on Gaia, on planet Earth, and sometimes it can be really crazy in this experience. What words of wisdom would you like to leave us with today?
Whew. Um,
No pressure.
yeah, no pressure. No, so I was already hearing stuff while you were speaking because, like you said, there's this like, I guess, telepathic, energetic release that's happening while I'm listening to you speak, and the word stillness was coming through really strongly, in terms of a lot of the different places that I visited and amazing different people, sometimes not so amazing people, however you want to like categorize anything. One of the themes that I've noticed is, and I didn't even know this about myself until honestly other people reflected it back, was the word stillness, and how I've always been, I guess, a very like I like to listen. I try to anyway, and there's something about just not being so afraid. You can be afraid if you want, but integrating the idea of just because things seem still doesn't mean something's going wrong. And sometimes we need a little bit of that recharging, especially now, like you were mentioning, there's so much chaos. A phrase that comes through, it's a little cheesy, but it comes through my channel all the time, of like being the chaos or being the stillness in the storm. It's kind of like the eye of the storm. And of course, the layering and the symbology behind the eye. I started having experiences years ago where I would just see this eye like in the sky. Everywhere I go, I see an eye. It's like an energetic eye. Sometimes it comes in different colors, different holographic images. And when you're first, sort of tuning in, sometimes it can be scary. Like I'm being watched, it can be like you can feel paranoid. So there's something about like always not being afraid to ask questions. And even if it's with yourself, like I would sit down and be like, okay, show me the information. Like, why am I being shown this? So there's something about continuing to embrace stillness if you're not already, and to really not be afraid to question things and ask and you shall receive. And the number 111 is coming through. And I know when we talk about manifestation, a big part of that is like what we want our outer world to look like, which is beautiful. I mean, I love aesthetics. I'm very into that. But there's something about 111 is a number that often comes through for me, as things are speeding up and things are coming to fruition. So to be more, again, aware and conscious of your part in that. And a big piece that's coming in right now for the collective is not just about calling in or manifesting external things, which again is important, but like information, fractals and pieces of yourself, soul retrieval, understanding. You may be going to a bookstore, and if a book keeps falling off the shelf, maybe you should pick it up, like, and open to a certain page. It's like things that are kind of like falling into your reality quite literally, and not being afraid to like continue to ask. And intuition is obviously so important, but so is like logic, reasoning, and learning how to work with all these parts of ourselves, not to only lean into one all the time, but to have that present moment awareness of when we need to like lean on one, integrate another, maybe be a little bit more one side. And it's it's like a beautiful dance that's always moving. It's not just like, okay, my intuition's sharp now. There's a present nuance to it, basically, is what's coming through.
Yeah, I love that, Jess. It sounds like balance. It's the yin and yang, or all
Yeah.
the classic depictions, right, of the
Right.
dance. And the yin and yang symbol is flowing. It's not a straight line cutting
Right.
the masculine and the feminine off. It's a wavy, almost looks like a wave actually, and I think that's very very appropriate, right? I think, and that's why I love music and dance and all that stuff, because we literally got to move through life in that way. I think for it to be more fun and a little less serious and intense sometimes, right? I think we forget to be playful with life, and I think that's probably what in many ways has gravitated me to things like music, because as a very good friend of mine always says, you don't work music, you play music, right? And it's just that
Okay.
constant reminder, to be playful. And there's just one thing I wanted to quickly touch on that we've talked about today, which is, we're talking about this awakening journey, and for our audience, I want to make it really really clear that there's no hierarchy. I'm not better than anyone here on watching and listening to this. If you are like, I'm not on an awakening journey, beautiful. As Jess said, like as you said, Jess, it's like, that's fine. I mean, I think all of our souls signed up for very different things, right?
Yes.
When we
Yeah.
came into this life, and I think a lot of us were like, I want to experience, not being awake to this stuff.
Yeah.
Cool. Honestly, I don't. There's sometimes can be a bit of a hierarchy in the spiritual community sometimes, where we're like, well, I'm enlightened, or I'm aware of all this stuff, therefore, everyone else are sheep, or everyone else are whatever. You hear those terms, right? And
Hmm.
I've never resonated with that, because, man, especially with the amount of travel I'm sure that you've done and that I've done, you meet so many beautiful beautiful souls that are, I don't use this word as an insult, but they're simple people, like, just, but they're so beautiful for that simplicity. And there's so much that I learn from those people that are not at all aware of the metaphysical crazy things that you and I are aware of. And who cares,
Right.
really? you know like, I don't know. I think we get a little too caught up in that stuff sometimes, and it just comes back to like, well, how do you want to be a human? How do you want to live your life, right? And just pursue that feeling, and that feeling could change, and that's okay too,
Yeah.
right? So we're dissolving the hierarchy on planet Earth, and it couldn't make me happier.
That was so beautifully said. And something else that always comes through. Sorry, do I have a second or?
You got it. You got a couple of seconds, more
Okay, it's
seconds.
actually 111 on the timer, which is funny because we were just talking
Wow.
about 111. But the middle path is something that comes through a lot. And like you were saying, um, when we dissolve the idea of hierarchy, and just like part of this, right, is coming back to the heart. And like when we integrate not just the heart, but like all of the hearts. We have our gut brain, this heart, a high heart, the thymus. That's where a lot of people believe the original angelic Christine blueprint like enters and reopens, like the lotus opens through the high heart, the thymus, which controls our immune system. So it always brings it back to the body too. And everything you were saying, yeah, in my travels, I've definitely met people. This one guy stands out to me. He worked in a very dingy little bar, and he would never, not that we should ever judge anyone by their cover, but like he was such an unconditionally loving human being with like, and all he wanted, he's like, I just like my job. I just do this. I volunteer. I do that. He was just, and I had like a 4-hour conversation with this man about all these metaphysical topics that he didn't have words for, but he was experiencing. And to be able to like, and he taught me things that I didn't even know I was looking for, so that is so important. And just 2 words that are coming through. I kept hearing the Polarian epoch and the Hyperborean epoch, just for your ancient mysteries. We didn't get into that today, but those 2 epochs, it's like the polar, the North Star, our North Pole. There's a very nebulous energy structure remembrance for a lot of us. So a lot of people may be having remembrances of like the gaseous plasma. You may be looking up at the sky and seeing like it looks like a cloud, but there's no clouds, like things like this. That's not for everyone, but the energies are really speeding up, and it's like we just want to get this message out. That I had that experience the other day. It was reminded, and like that just wanted to come through, and I kept trying to weave it in, but like I just wanted to bring that in. So maybe I'll do a video on that, but just for those who are tapping into that sort of that point of remembrance, that's very strong in the energy that's coming through. Atlantis and Lemuria are huge right now, but I feel like the Polarian and Hyperborean are starting to like be unearthed, if you will. Yeah.
Well, this podcast is open-ended here, so I need to know a little bit more. Can you elaborate on that? The Hyperborean? I haven't heard of those two. Lemuria,
Oh,
Atlantis, obviously, but what are
oh,
what
really?
epochs are those? Yeah, please enlighten us.
So I'm using the reference. So I started having these experiences come through recently again, but I would say my first, at least conscious experience with the Polarian epoch was probably in like 2018, 2019. That's going to have to be a whole other story because that was a very interesting metaphysical experience where I was like literally taken out of my body and shown the idea. I didn't know at the time it was the Polarian epoch, but through, again, information, synchronicity, I was shown and given different like light encoded words to tap me into different studies. And anthroposophy seems to be, I don't love everything in anthroposophy, but the epochs and the way they break down. So the Polarian epoch is supposed to be one of like where the nascent, NASCENT, like where the earth essentially was, it's not even really, it was like still kind of connected with the sun, right? So when we talk about the Christos, the solar energy, it was like a nebulous type of reality. And a lot of people, I believe, either currently and or are starting to have memories of a more type of like etheric nebulous type of experience. So the stars, I think, are our greatest teacher for that, like the filament of the stars, the connectivity. When you really start to tap into your multidimensionality, you may be seeing the sky differently than other people. And that's like this Polarian epoch memory coming through and reintegrating back into, I don't know if it's back into, but really just like awaiting those molecular structure memories within the body that are like integrating down and starting to like expand again. And the Hyperborean epoch was the following epoch after the Polarian epoch. Again, the word polar, the star and star system Polaris is coming through. And part of the reason why right now the North Star, because it can switch, they're showing me the North Star being Polaris is so relevant to help us remember this aspect of our own civilization, like our ancient civilizations. And really like everything's happening at once in some way, but that's up to us to like pull that back in and to acknowledge it essentially more consciously. Those of us who feel connected, not everyone, of course.
Wow. I love that. I love that. Yeah, you get to learn something new every day, don't you? This is part of this fun reality. Oh, this is so cool. Jess, thank you so much for all the information, all the wisdom today, all the beautiful energy you shared with us. Where can people work with you, find out more about you, connect with you? Let's give the people all that good stuff.
I don't know if you see, there's this like tiny little gnat that's been here. Like it did not, I've been in this house for a month. I haven't seen this. And as soon as I started recording, the cat and the gnat, not to rhyme, literally have been circulating. So that could be a little message for someone out there. But I have a website, my name, Jess Routhenstein, that's on the screen.com, with my services listed. And I also like create tinctures. I work a lot with Ormus Gold. I don't know if anyone has worked with that. I do a lot of research, and I know there's a lot of debate around the potency and the safety of Ormus. So I really trust who I work with. And I also have a YouTube channel, Jess Routhenstein, and a Patreon membership that I started where I just sort of record the collective energy, metaphysical experiences, really whatever wants to come through in that moment. And they come through as like energetic transmissions, and they're very layered and not always super obvious, but there's like an unfolding within that. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it right now. And I also just started writing articles on Substack.
I saw that. Yeah, that's great. So we'll have all that information, as always, everyone, in the show notes below. So check out Jess's work and connect with her if you've resonated with what she's been talking about today. I highly recommend it because she's got a lot to share clearly and a lot of beautiful wisdom and some really wonderful energy, Jess. So thank you so much for coming on to the show today. I really appreciate it.
Oh my God. Thank you so much. And thank you for everything you're doing. It's really amazing. I'm really grateful. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Well, we'll catch you next time. And for the rest of our audience, wasn't that cool? Wow. My brain's, as always, spinning in a slightly out of control way, as always, after these episodes. Just so fascinating. I got lots to think about. I'm sure all you who have watched and listened have a lot to think about. Let me know what you're thinking about in the comments below. If this is on YouTube, if it's somewhere else, you can drop us a line. As always, information's in the show notes. A couple quick announcements before we end the episode. We've got the Egypt 2026 tour coming up in September of next year, 2026. Find out the information for that epic adventure. down in the show notes as well. I'm going to be going with Mohammed Ibrahim, who's an incredible Egyptologist. He goes with, Forbidden Knowledge, Billy Carson. He goes with Uncharted X. He's an incredible Egyptologist who I was fortunate enough to be with back in 2019 with Dr. Robert Schock, and he's going to be our guide as well. We're going to be going with Neil of Portal to Ascension as well. So it's going to be a really fun time reconnecting with our ancient ancestors, and of course, on a more cosmic level and Atlantean level, it's going to be a really wild adventure. Egypt does what Egypt does. We'll leave it at that. And then, of course, there is the therapeutic music library that I just launched as well. So if you're wanting to use some 432 hertz binaural beats, solfeggio frequencies in your meditations, in your work, in your whatever you want, this is the place to go to get it royalty free, which means you can use it for all your commercial purposes. Really trying to make therapeutic music a more accessible thing, and trying to really make it a more mainstream thing, because music's more than entertainment, and the ancients certainly knew that. And that's why, temples like the one in my background here in Egypt were designed with acoustics in mind, sound in mind, and we're just getting back to that awareness. So check out the music library if that resonates. And of course, Portal to Ascension, our amazing partner, they're doing the New Living Expo next year in the spring. And of course, the Mediterranean cruise that I'm really excited about. We were talking about Greece and the Mediterranean and Italy and stuff today. We're going to be hitting those incredible places, especially the Greek Isles, in March of next year. So if you want to hop on that Mediterranean cruise, also check it out in the show notes. Lots of cool stuff going on, as always, but I'll end it off there. Thank you, everyone, for this wonderful episode. Thank you, Jess, for being an incredible guest. And for everyone watching and listening, I just want to say much, much love to you. It's a beautiful and crazy journey that we're on. But honestly, I wouldn't have it any other way. All right. Much love, everyone. And we'll see you in the next episode of Ancient Mysteries Unearthed. Until next time.